Okay, great. So basically, and we realized that okay, well, digital technology can help us kind of either relive these moments, and it's always, they always say you imagine the past from the present. So there is a deep interest in our present, in our governments, in our government policies, in the way culture is moving, to kind of go back to this ancient Egyptian common denominator. Egypt has for several years, for over 6 years, has struggled with Islamization on one hand, Americanization, Westernization on the other hand, and it has kind of polarized the society. But when it comes to ancient Egypt, they realize that this is the one denominator that really is able to overcome sectarian strife, is something that brings us all together. So there's this renewed interest in ancient Egypt, and it happened first of all with the Mummies Parade. I don't know if any of our listeners would have watched it, but there was a mummy parade a few years ago. They moved the mummies from the museum in Tahrir to another museum, a new museum in Egypt. And then there was, of course, the opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum. And there's this renewed sense of pride for all of us that we have this new project. It's a mega project. It took 20 years in the making. Egypt, during the time, of course, we had the 2011 uprising, the Arab Spring. So that kind of halted the project a little bit. But we continued. And the reason for the Grand Egyptian Museum was because actually, as museums, other museums are trying to fill up their space with pieces. Another kind of problem is that we have too many artifacts and we don't have enough space to exhibit them. So we came up with the idea of building a museum right next to the three pyramids, which would host the main artifacts of Egypt, and of course the entire Tutankhamun exhibition, which is so Tutankhamun would be reunited under one roof for the first time. Perhaps it's interesting to tell visitors that people always ask us, why is it that Tutankhamun, why is it that Tutankhamun? I mean, why didn't the other countries take it? Obviously, if the Tutankhamun, if anyone saw the mask, they'd want to keep it in their own country. But because the discovery of Tutankhamun was after Egypt passed a law in the Supreme Council that said that any of the excavations, any of the output of the excavations would remain in Egypt. It wasn't the case before. So it was kind of in the middle of of a growing national sentiment, etc., at the turn of the 20th century. So this is why Tutankhamun's discovery stayed in Egypt. So this is what we like to say, the Grand Egyptian Museum is the home to Tutankhamun, but it's also the home to ancient Egypt. That's what I consider. We always think of, what do we call this museum? Is it the biggest museum in the world? It's not the biggest museum in the world. There are other bigger museums. Is it the biggest Egyptian collection? People argue about it because it is the biggest Egyptian collection on display. But the museum in Turin, for example, the British Museum, has a lot of pieces in storage. And there's always this competition between museums that I never really knew, is that how do you count your pieces? Do you count it by actual pieces, or do you count it by showcases? But when I like to think of a superlative to say for this museum, it's really the home of ancient Egypt, right? Here you get to see the whole spectrum of life in ancient Egypt. The main galleries take you through a chronological journey across ancient Egypt. We have pieces that are dating back 700,000 pieces, obviously before civilization, and then we go through the early dynasties, we go through the pyramid builders, all the way to the Greco-Roman period. So it takes you through an entire journey through ancient Egypt, and you get to see the common Egyptians. So one of my favorite pieces, for example, are something called the ostrakas. And those ostrakas, papyrus was very expensive. So what the workers used to do is they used to sketch on little slabs of I guess what it was, alabaster, or I don't know, something cheap, probably not alabaster, but they used to scribble and sketch and even write love poems. And it really shows you the workers behind these grand monuments. And it helps you humanize the entire process. Oh my God, it's actually for 20 years these people labored to build the pyramids. And it makes all these things that we find fantastical. It gives them a sense of reality. When you hear the aliens built the pyramids, it's laughable because we have proof of actual diaries of workers who are noting every single day how much they built and what they did and how much they long to go back to their families because it's excruciating. It really humanizes the history of ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
I think I get to see that anywhere else.
Yeah, and it's exactly those sort of stories that I love hearing about, because although we talk a lot about technology, technology is really a pointless conversation without the human element. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you bringing all of that history that humanity, the story of how this was brought to life. And if we connect that to the technology in the museum, you mentioned a problem. You didn't have enough space for all these artifacts. Can you
Mhm.
tell us how you are tackling that with technology? So what sort of technology initiatives have you introduced into the museum? I know we have AI, VR, MR. If you can give us like just a very brief intro to each of those technologies and how you've introduced them.
Before I go into the emerging technologies and kind of like the user facing technologies, I want to talk about the actual technologies involved in museum display, for example. Obviously, from climatization to lighting, we have digital streams all over. We have tactiles that describe stuff for access for people with limited accessibility. We have technology also, simulations of tombs. This is in the actual permanent exhibitions. We have simulations of tombs where you get to see the drawings kind of done in order, so you see how they evolve and what they mean. We have you could hear the sound of instruments. So we have all these instruments from ancient Egypt, but you could actually get to hear them. It's a simulation that makes you hear them, how they used to sound in ancient Egypt. So there's technology in the actual exhibition. But like the picture that you're showing right now, we also, one of our main mandates in the museum is to bring attractions to locals, right? Immersive exhibitions might be an old thing for a lot of people around the world, but in our region, no, they're not. They're extremely new. We wanted to, our museum was still closed, but we wanted to go hype for the opening and for the coming of Tut, etc. So we held an immersive exhibition called Tutankhamun, and it takes you through his afterlife journey. It was extremely popular, particularly with the locals, but also because it was an international blockbuster. So we also had a lot of international tourists who were coming, and it was very successful because museums in the world, not just us, we always struggle with the young bracket, right? The teenagers, the young adults, the kids, and technology really helps bring them in. And also there's the idea of, for me, ancient Egypt is a story that never gets old, right? And particularly because they've left us all these almost ambiguous and enigmatic stories and reliefs behind that allows for so much interpretation. So how is it that when we see a static image on a pyramid wall or on a tomb relief, how do we get all these knowledge? How do we imagine them? How do we imagine them moving? How do we, when we hear SFX, for example, when it's a battle scene and we hear SFX from giving us battle sounds, how does, as if you're on the battleground, how does this make you feel? It helps us imagine it in ways that we couldn't have imagined it before. So there's of course immersive technologies. They really do immerse you in the story. You get to, and it's also just fascinating just to see this kind of. It's always nice to see the very old with the very new. And this museum, unlike other museums, has been built in modern times. So we have technology embedded on the capillary level. We have beacons, we have NFC, we have different in the infrastructure itself. We have heat maps, for example, to control crowd management. That gives us an idea of the crowds at peak hours, which is very important. After the museum opened, we had kind of a Black Friday directly after the opening, where people came in stock. I mean, it was we had almost, we were expecting around 15,000. We got 28,000 at the door. It was an incredible number. We couldn't manage it. We it was above our capacity, and we had to close entrance for that day. But it was thanks to technology such as heat maps that allowed us to see, okay, what are the peak hours, when were people coming, and where are the congestion areas. Obviously, the mask is a congestion area, but it's interesting. You know, you keep imagining, or you ask Egyptologists what would be the pieces that people would like, and then they end up liking pieces that you never thought they would like, and there's congestion there. So that helps us. That helps us. For example, how do we take this data? When I see that people are standing in front of something called the Mesihti army, for example, a small army, like a replica of an army that was in a model of an army, people really like it. When I find out that people stand there for a long time, two things happen. Well, several things happen actually. But for people involved in the visitor experience, obviously they need to manage crowd management. So we have to think of a new way to circulate. For people who are involved in the gift shop, they get ideas, right? Oh, people really like the Mesihti army. Let's do products that are inspired by that. For me, working on the Alti Guide, I say, oh my God, I have to have a stop for the Mesihti army because obviously people are stopping there. So this kind of data-informed decision making is very real for us. because it is our first time running such a huge museum. It's the biggest in Egypt by far. We are using a lot of foreign expertise. That is true, especially in the curation. However, it is a very local project, right? A lot of us are locals, and it's important whenever you're listening to the Grand Egyptian Museum to know that this is a museum built by Egyptians, and it's very important because we have been excluded from Egyptology, ironically, for centuries. Egyptology, we used to just bring water to the excavator teams, right? This is what we used to do. We used to be living with these tombs, living with these ancient miracles, and it's a living tradition, right? So the people who live in Luxor, for example, next to the tombs, they sleep there when it gets hot. They keep the same traditions. They still do the same practices with their kids, with the embroidery. A lot of the crafts has still existed. So this is a living tradition for us. It's not an artifact that you're going to take out of its place and place it in a vitrine or in a showcase in a museum in Florence and then call it Egyptian. When you see things, you know how they always say you should eat where you next to where you farm, or like from farm to table, or is it farm to fork or something? And the whole idea is being close to the origin, to the source. So at the Ancient Egyptian Museum, you are really close to the source. And the fact that we've been excluded from this history is remarkable. I mean, imagine being excluded from your own history and from able to study it. There was no Egyptologists, there were no conservators who were working who were Egyptian. And that all changed obviously after the Supreme Law passed, but also because in the mid-century we started having very important Egyptologists making very important discoveries. And over the last years, it has been mostly Egyptians making the discoveries. So that's a great thing. When you go to the museum in Tahrir, our old museum, which is also a magnificent piece of architecture, and it's standalone, it's amazing. But if you go to where they sign there's a little plaque where all the architects sign their names. Not a single name is Egyptian. So all the people who made this museum for Egyptians, they never involved us in the making of the museum. So it's important for us that this is a place where Egyptians can tell their story. And I really mean that I don't want to use today's psychological jargon and don't gaslight us, but we have been gaslit from the story, and it's our turn to really say it out there and to put it out there in our own words, and that's what's really fascinating about it.
Well, I'm incredibly proud and really happy, Nancy, that we can tell your story today, that we can bring Egypt, Egypt is brought to the rest of the world, and we're doing only something really small here on XRHQ Live, but I'm glad we can at least contribute to that mission of showcasing what Egypt can do and Egypt's investment in its history and in its technology. So thank you for mentioning that. So would you like to run us through the innovations at the museum and how you've gone about it?
Yeah, so also tricky because whenever you apply innovations to any context, it has its own particularities. So I'm heading innovation at the Grand Egyptian Museum. And so obviously we have all these incredible projects that we want to do, AR, XR, just in general, obviously AI, all the emerging technologies we're working with. But the first real problem we face is that there is a resistance towards digital technologies in the tourism industry, because the tourism industry is a huge industry in Egypt, and a huge bracket of the industry work as tour guides. So, for example, when we came to introduce our audio guide, this is the direct challenge or a direct threat to the livelihood of a lot of people in Egypt. Or at least it's seen as such, that if you start giving people digital outlets, first of all, it will decrease footfall. So if we give people virtual access to the museum, then they might not come in person. Of course, for me, as someone who is attached to digital heritage, I think this is bogus. I think, on the contrary, people, when they see virtual tours or they get to see the museum, it's like teasers. They're never gonna. It's not the same as the real thing, but at the same time, it's enough to intrigue them, especially for younger visitors, right? You're trying to instill this curiosity for ancient Egypt at a young age. It is through these technologies. So VR, this week we're launching a new experience. It's an escape room, and you're basically in a tomb, and you have to discover stuff to get out of the tomb. And it's really exciting. We tried it out before as a pilot. People loved it. And especially the young people and even older people. And they just want to engage. It's interactive history. It's an enormous museum. So after hours spent, visiting the main galleries and the Tutankhamun galleries, you do want to exit a little bit from this content heavy material and do an experience. So we have the immersive, we have a VR coming up, we have a mixed reality hall, a Microsoft mixed reality hall, and it's AR, and it takes you through the building of the pyramids, and it teaches you about how the pyramids were built. And it's also very interesting. People are really liking it, and we are facing the pyramids, right? But all the so they have the actual pyramids there, the pyramid complex, but we have the stories of the pyramid builders. So Khufu, Menkaura, all the kings that are, to whom these pyramids belong, they are actually at the museum. Their statues and their stories are at the museum. And then we also have the Khufu's boats, also known as the solar boats, which were buried next to the pyramids, and now they are housed at the Grand Egyptian Museum. So there is this relationship with the pyramids, and people have to understand that their feet, I mean, almost, I want to say 10,000, I'm horrible at math, but I want to say 10,000 feet from one another. So we're banking on the same tourists. I mean, the tourists that are going to come to the pyramids are the ones that are going to come to us. Before we had kind of like a competition, who's getting more tourists, they or them, they or us. But then we realized that at the end, at the end we serve the same purpose. And at the end, if you're going to the gem, you're going to go to the pyramids. And if you're going to the pyramids, you're going to go to the gem. But we're trying to do a continuation in terms of storytelling. So this is why our mixed reality is about the pyramid builders. So there's these things that we insert about the pyramids. It's great, people like them. And of course, there are problems in technology, right? For example, with the AR, there are issues of calibration. There are issues sometimes of glitching. The glasses you have to renew them. It becomes obsolete after a few years. So one of the ways that we're actually trying to keep up with this technology is that we have a Gem Hackathon, and it's in the 4th year in the making, this Gem Hackathon. We're in our 4th edition. And what we do is we basically pose a problem. For example, in our children museum, all our exhibits, the technology was kind of becoming outdated. Kids would go into the children museum and they'd get bored. And this is the last thing we want. So we made the first problem for our hackathon, how to reimagine these exhibits in a digital way. And our participants came up with a solution, and we're installing it at the museum. So this was a way that we kind of, we didn't have a lot of resources, and we wanted to make sure that our technology is up to date by the time we open the museum and we launch. This year, we're working on, people leave we have a lot of feedback forms, but people are not necessarily filling out the feedback forms. And we need a lot of feedback, especially in the first year of operation, to improve, to optimize everything. So we're doing kind of like touch points, interesting touch points to incentivize people to leave feedback. And that's also done by our hackathon participants. So we keep choosing problem areas that we feel technology could help. And we do a hackathon that invites people from the community, fresh grads, young professionals, to give back to the museum, and to everyone wants their work, published at the museum, whether it's a project or it's a. So people are really excited to give back to the museum and to participate in its building. So there's this way that we tackle technology, but usually we have to invest in new hardware, in new technology. It's something that it's in our mandate. We have to keep doing it besides getting standalone experiences that involve technology, there's also the existing technology infrastructure that needs to be constantly updated.
Yeah, I love the fact that you've brought basically crowdsourced innovation and brought the community together to build some of these initiatives at the Grand Egyptian Museum. I think it's very rare that a community gets access to such a large project. Usually it's totally inaccessible. It's only in the remit of the most senior stakeholders, and they make all the decisions. So I think that's a very unique and admirable take on.
It's a sense of ownership
innovation.
also that we want to give them. Of course, in the beginning, we tell them to point out the problem points in the museum. So I'm a sore loser, right? So I give them the Audi guide and I start telling them, okay, tell me about the problems we could fix in the Audi guide. They start listing problems and they lose me. All my community service capacity goes away. So
I've got a question.
They give you user feedback, right? It's so important to have feedback. Now we're investing a lot in data. We're investing a lot in getting feedback from the users, and it's been extremely helpful.
And can you give us a little bit a balanced perspective on the technology implementation at the Grand Egyptian Museum? So I'm thinking you've introduced AI, VR, MR, and those have been of great benefit. But what have been the challenges with integrating those technologies? What has made it difficult or made you think twice about it?
Okay, well, approvals. That would be my first number one issue. Getting content approved. We wouldn't know it before working in it, but Egyptology is such a politicized area of study. I mean, I thought working on the Jews and Algerians in France would be difficult. Working on Egyptology is so difficult. There are so many. It's been a history, first of all, that's been cleansed, whether it's been by Muslim invaders to Egypt, Christians in Egypt, Christian culture in Egypt, whether it's been by European invaders to Egypt. Everyone who has invaded ancient Egypt, let's say, because ancient Egyptians are the natives to this country, have attempted to cleanse this history. So the approval process to be able to say, for example, I don't know if Ramses's wife is his sister or his wife, right? He calls her sister wife. So what does it mean? If I write this in the audio guide, it will never pass. It will never pass. How do you know it's his sister? No, 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 it's not his sister. It might be his wife. If it's a might be, then we don't put it. It's a history. No one knows anything for sure. That's what I keep telling them. I mean, any history, if it happened yesterday, if I tell you what happened yesterday for me, it's not true, right? History, once if it's not present and once it enters into language and I have to describe it and there's so many biases, it's no longer a fact. But
Yeah.
this history is so based. It's such a factual history. It's based on validation versus signification, right? It's very based on, oh, how many tons is this statue? Where was it found? In the temple of Amun. Who was this related to? She was the Tutankhamun, might have been the son of Akhenaten. These things are interesting, but there's so much more to Egyptology. This is not what you want to hear on face value. You want to hear what things symbolize, what kind of wisdom you get from. They had an incredible amount of wisdom, right? So this is the kind of knowledge that you want to extract from them. It's impossible, especially in the audio guide. It was a very difficult experience because the audio guide needs to be a little bit cinematic. You want it to be exciting. So I remember there was this one piece where I was saying that Thutmose III was a huge warrior. So there's a very famous battle, and it's recorded. It's called the Battle of Megiddo. And I just started the audio guide by saying that imagine Thutmose, and it was a mountain. So I just said Thutmose standing on the mountain, leading the battle with his chariots. It was a very basic introduction. Oh, they didn't let it pass, and I fought for it. There's something so simple, but just the idea of they kept asking me, where is the proof that he was standing on the mountain? I mean, he obviously stood on the mountain. That's how he won. But just that leap, that creative license is not allowed. Everything needs to be approved. So, for example, when we came to do the Tooth immersive, there are some scenes where Tooth, of course, people, once you move from into entertainment, there is a creative license, right? And you're not, I mean, all this experience Tooth immersive was working with the team of Egyptologists, but sometimes they do things for entertainment purposes. So Tutankhamun was wearing a kilt, but the kilt didn't really look like the one he wore after in the coronation. Oh, they wanted us to change the actual. It was a game that we had imported. It was a game that was already airing all over the world. We couldn't change any of the designs. We couldn't change any of the artwork.
Yeah.
But it was a big fight to get them to accept that this is for entertainment purpose. This is not just educational. There are things that are different. So approvals are extremely difficult.
Bureaucracy.
It's
similar issue, right?
And I also understand that it's such a. I mean, this history. Even when I'm interestingly enough, when I'm working with the audio guide, the different languages, you could see how the different European languages are competing with each other for claim over ancient Egypt. I mean, you get one European country, for example, that tells me I must be the first European country that's translated the audio guide. And they say things like, we didn't steal any of your artifacts, we only helped Egyptology. And all these countries have incredible research centers in Egypt dedicated to Egyptology. So all the major European powers have an invested, a vested, what's it called, interest in Egyptology. So when you find that it's such a, when it's a space that's argued over, when it's a space that it's almost a combative space, you know what I mean? Where everyone wants their piece, everyone wants their narrative out there. If you go on the Louvre, for example, website, they call themselves the safeguarders of Egyptian history. Of course, this is an insult to a lot of other people. A lot of other people who have invested a lot of money in excavations, and an insult to us, because there's always this narrative that Egyptians can't take care of their own stuff. It's too good to keep with the Egyptians, you know? Take away the Nefertiti buzz, they wouldn't have been able to handle it. Extremely insulting. So I understand why approvals are so difficult. Now, these things, they create a backlash. They don't want, they don't want to put forth this. There's always, for example, an avoidance.
There's a lot at stake, right?
there's a lot of stake, and there's always
Yeah.
an avoidance, like for example the sister, obviously the incest stuff, but also they don't want to talk about decline. Like I wanted to
Yeah.
say once that there was a decline after the first intermediary period, after the middle, after the first kingdom, the old kingdom. Obviously there was a decline, and then we had the
And
middle
sorry
kingdom.
to interrupt you, Nancy. Can I just quickly ask a question about the AI? And we've only got 10 minutes left or
Oh,
so. So
sorry.
that's all right. I really appreciate your the depth at which you're giving us this information. I'm sure it's not known to many of us. But we talked about AI
Yeah.
bias during our conversation. Can you introduce us to what the issues were there?
Okay. So it's kind of related, actually. It is to approvals, right? So people always tell us, why can't we use AI? We will be introducing an AI bot to our audio guide. That's the first place we're using audio and AI. But the problem is when you feed AI a large language model, when you realize that there's a lot of these contested and conflicting narratives that come out. We got someone who wanted to do an AI immersive exhibition at the museum, and this museum is basically it's AI generated. So you say ancient Egypt and you keep generating images. Interestingly, when they came to present to us, they were just as astounded as us. But whenever they generate an image, at one point Cleopatra would appear black, for example, and at another point Cleopatra would appear with unicorn horns or something. And another part she'd appear looking like a little bit like a Greco-Roman statue, and we'd realize there's so many different depictions of Cleopatra, and we would never tolerate any of them. You're right. We are Egypt's official stance is no, Cleopatra was not African. Cleopatra was Northern African, right? So we're refusing the Afrocentrism that's coming, this new discourse on ancient Egypt. All the unicorns are basically because there's a lot of discourse out there about the fact that aliens built the pyramids and this is a UFO kind of civilization. So obviously we're refuting that. We can't use it. When he came to do the exhibition in Egypt, we told him we could never take that risk. And he told us, interestingly though, that when he came to do an exhibition, a similar exhibition about Greco-Roman history, about antiquities in Greece, he never had these hallucinations, and he never had these contesting conflicts. It was always white men with muscles and statues with their curly hair. It was the same. Every time they generate an image, it was the same. For me, what's interesting isn't the immersive show that he wanted to do. For me, what's interesting is that if you use these generated images and kind of do reverse engineering, how conflicting are these narratives about ancient Egypt, that we have a million different depictions of Cleopatra versus Greco-Roman gods and goddesses that appear with the same style. So it's difficult to use an open kind of source for our audio guide or for exhibitions. What we want to do is use obviously a closed language model. How would that happen? Is that now I have over 10 hours of audio for the audio guide. And what we are wanting to do is that, say, for example, you ask a question about Cleopatra in one of the stops. You ask, who was Cleopatra married to? Across the 10 hours, Cleopatra has, say, for example, 15 different stops. But in one stop, we're talking about her statue, right? In another stop, we're talking about her family life. In another stop, we're talking about something else, her rule. If you ask at any of the points where you ask a question about Cleopatra, we will be able to gather our answers from the already verified and approved text. So you'd have to create a language model particularly for the museum, for the audio guide, with closed, with closed margins. And that's what we want to do, right? And because with the AI, with the audio guide, what people are really missing is that personal touch. People do want to ask questions and get answers, and it's impossible to ignore that. I mean, I get so many offers of people wanting to do the AI bot in for the audio guide. So it's something we cannot ignore anymore. But we just have to make sure that the data that we give it is approved by us. Because any glitch, any hallucination, if a picture of Cleopatra with unicorns comes out from our museum, oh my God, the backlash.
Very reputationally damaging. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're also trying to use AI, obviously, positively. So this AI in the audio guide is a little bit challenging. AI for immersive shows, challenging. But obviously, we're using AI for data analysis. I mean, that's helping us.
When you say immersive shows, Nancy, are you talking about like this one that we have on screen here?
This immersive show was not AI generated. It was developed, and it was not AI generated. It was based on real images, or not real images. It was based on historical images.
Yeah, it was carefully curated and checked.
Yeah, it was. It's not AI generated. AI generated is like by companies like Ouch, and they do generative AI shows. So you can never predict what's going to come up next. we can't take that that
That
risk.
risk, exactly.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of good questions coming in, Nancy. Can I
Okay.
throw some of
Yes,
them
of
to you?
course. Hmm.
Brilliant. So first of all, we have Zina from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and she is asking. Let me just bring up her question here. What are the ways of technology that are used in the museum now? So you mentioned AI, you mentioned the audio guides. We talked about mixed reality, projection mapping with the immersive shows, the heat maps. Are we missing anything else?
Well, for the opening, for example, we had a drone show. We had mapping, obviously, on the facade. We had a lot of these projects, but I don't think you're missing anything yet. This year, we're planning a new exhibition that's going to involve new mapping. But no, these are mostly the technology.
Projection
Are we
mapping,
missing
right?
any? If you feel we're missing, Zena, if you feel we're missing any technology, please let us know. I
Brilliant.
mean,
And then
yeah.
we have Shahani who's asking, are the experiences made in-house or do you work with external studios? And if so, which ones?
We do work. This immersive show, for example, was it was already made by Mad, a company in a Spanish company, and they developed several immersive shows. They did the Tutankhamun, and then they did Titanic, and now they're doing Cleopatra. So this was it was an off the shelf exhibition. But with mixed reality, they worked with us. A lot of the times, what happens is that people come in with the tech know-how, and we give them the content. So we script the story, we give them the concept, but they execute it in terms of technology. And then what we usually do also is that we get the hardware. So we have the hardware here, it's cheaper to get. They do the tech development and we do the content development. That's how
Brilliant.
usually it works.
Shlomo, I'm not sure if we can fit your entire question here, Shlomo. Oh, we kind of, but I'll read it out. Shlomo is asking, can you please expand on the experience and logistics or technical aspects of XR? So this is the virtual reality and the mixed reality side of things. How interactive is it? Can people use their hands to engage? How many people use it at once? How long are the experiences? Do people pay separately for the XR experience? So if
Okay.
you
Actually,
forget
they're
any of
great
those
questions,
points, Nancy,
Shlomo.
I'll repeat it, but see how
They're
far you
great
can get.
questions, Shlomo. They sound like someone who works at the museum.
I think he does. I
Well,
think he does.
it's they are ticketed apart. I mean, it's a separate ticket. You buy an individual ticket for these experiences. We will eventually bundle these experiences so that you get a ticket that allows you to experience them differently. It depends. For the mixed reality, you could have around 10, 15 people at a time. But for the VR escape room, for example, it's 4 people maximum per group, and you could have 2 groups. It's a small space. We don't encourage people to play alone because it's an escape room, so you have to have a partner. For the immersive show, it was 80 people at for each showing, so it was 80 people at each showing. And then they would go on throughout the day. We'd have one version in Arabic and one version in English. And we were really sold out for 6 months. It was quite impressive. So that's the capacity usually. For audio guides, we have a capacity. It's ongoing throughout the day. We have 300 devices and they run out really quickly. We're adding new languages, so expect even to keep adding more devices. So yeah, so we sell them apart. The tickets are usually, I mean, I don't know if people know this, but the ticket for entrance for the museum is different for Egyptians than for foreigners. It's subsidized for Egyptians, but that usually happens whenever you're in a country where the local currency is lower than the foreign currency. So, but for these experiences, the ticket is the same. So if you're Egyptian or if you're American taking the audio guide, you pay the same price. Did I miss anything from Shlomo's
I think that
question?
answers everything. And in fact, I think you also answered Jacques' question. So Jacques saying, how many visitors can you accommodate in your VR and MR dedicated space? I guess it can only be a small portion of your visitors. So you've got the VR multi free roam experience, which is happening this
Mm-hmm.
week, and the separate mixed
Mm-hmm.
reality one. What's the how many visitors can you accommodate in each one of those?
Well, like I said, it's 2 groups at a time for the VR, and we have something like 15 slots. So if you do the math, yeah, someone's gonna have to calculate that. So say 8 people times 15. That's
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, for the VR. For the mixed
120.
reality, it's from 15 to 20 people per session, and it has around like 10 sessions per day. So yeah, that's the number of people we could accommodate. But it's because it's a limited space. That's all. But
Yeah.
we keep increasing our headphone intake. We're increasing the device intakes just so that we could be able to have more. But I
Brilliant.
mean, it's
Thank you.
the conversion rate. Usually, we aim for 15,000 visitors a day. So the conversion rate for the tech stuff is around 5%. That's
And
what
is
we're
that, do you
aiming
know
for.
if that's on par for technology implementations in museums? Do you have any idea?
I can't really tell you because other museums, what they do is they sometimes have exhibitions that are technical, that
Mm.
are. But I don't. I mean, when I go to museums, usually I don't find a special part just for VR. We are an incredibly large complex, so there's an entire part where we could have activities. But usually here I go to. If I'm abroad, I pay 16 euros and I go to a digital experience. But I don't have like a VR corner at the Louvre. You know what I mean? It's not the same thing, so I can't really compare it.
And Shiva is asking, are you planning to create a digital twin of the museum at all?
We have also had many requests for that, and like I said, it's this fear of people visiting the museum online and not coming for real. But it's in the pipeline. We're going to do it eventually.
Yeah.
People, I mean, digital twins are people are doing it of everything, and people like it. And I mean, you could just tell by the kind of questions people are asking on this forum that people are looking for, more engaging technology. I think it
Yeah,
was Shlomo who also asked me maybe if it was interactive. The games are interactive. With the VR, you get to pick up stuff. With the escape room, you're playing with people, so it's interactive. You get to use your hands in the free roaming experience.
brilliant. And we've got one more here from Jacques who's saying, have you considered touring your XR exhibition around international museums?
Well, the immersive exhibition is touring anyways. What we are planning to tour is our own digital exhibition that we will be doing this year. Unfortunately, I can't really share the content of it because first of all, it's with my colleague, but also because we want to keep it on the down low. But we will be touring with digital experiences that we are creating in house. But the I mean, it wouldn't make sense to move with the XR, with for example, the AR in the HoloLens room, in the mixed reality room, because it's based on actual pieces that are exhibited there. So it's augmented reality. So we wouldn't be able to travel with
You'd
it.
have to bring the
And
physical
honestly, it's not
pieces
worth
as
it.
well.
It's not worth it. If we're gonna travel with something, we want to travel with something new, about new discoveries. Make it about something, a topic that hasn't been discussed in Egypt before.
Brilliant. I appreciate that, Nancy. And we are coming to the last few minutes. And thank you, everyone, for asking your questions. It's always exciting when we get to hear your thoughts and make this a more dynamic discussion. I know in the crowd we have people from all over the world, including from Egypt itself, which I'm very happy to see. And we also have people from the technology world, so from XR, from immersive. We have people from museums in the audience. Thank you all for being here. We probably have time for one or two more questions if you want to ask. But I have a question I'm very curious about, Nancy, which is you've talked about so many different technologies now. You've talked about virtual reality. We talked about mixed reality. We talked about drones. We talked about data mapping, projection mapping, heat maps, AI, of course. I'm trying to think, what other technologies could you possibly implement? And have you thought about implementing any others? I suppose the only one that comes to my mind is maybe robotics, 3D printing. And perhaps an add-on question to that is, have you considered integrating some of these technologies? So maybe AI in the MR experience or in the VR experience and so on.
Well, AI is going to be naturally embedded in these experiences just because of script writing, for example, for these experiences. For AI, for developing the establishing shots, because there's a little bit of in the development, I'm sure there's going to be AI used. But the technologies that we are looking to use, I think, is holographic. We haven't used any holograms or holographs in our exhibitions, and like I said, I'd really be interested to do showcases where they're empty showcases, and then we say the Nefertiti bus should have been here, and then something appears. Like just an exhibition of all our lost pieces. So that's something we want to do for sure. Other technologies that we're 3D mapping, we're going into more this year.
3D mapping? Are you talking about 3D printing?
No, sorry, 3D mapping. I mean, as in mapping.
Oh,
as in
like
mapping
reality capture.
3D mapping, 3D printing. We actually use it, but on such a small scale. But we have like scavenger hunts, and we have like excavation pits made for kids. So we print the replicas. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's basic like that. So I mean, for now, maybe we haven't really capitalized on all this potential for these technologies yet, but it's coming, you know. But I would be interested to know what 3D printing could do. And I encourage anyone who, by the way, who's working in this space to reach out to me if you have any interesting projects. We're always interested to hear. This is a global museum. It's you know, it's for Egyptians, but it's really, yeah, it's our shared history here. We all know ancient Egypt and love it. And especially in technology, technology is great when it takes you to places we can never imagine. So so it's very nice. It goes very well. It couples well with ancient Egypt. So if anyone here is working in this space and would like to propose an idea that you haven't heard me say and you think that would work well, please do let us know. I mean, Jeremy could share my contacts at the museum, and we could get in touch.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that because Mohammed Harris actually does have a proposal, and he's put it forward on the LinkedIn comments. So I'm sure you can connect afterwards if you'd like to hear
Okay,
that.
great.
And yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having this discussion with you. Thank you to the audience for asking your questions and engaging with us and being part of this experience. I feel like you really brought it to life for us, Nancy. So
Thank
we're
you,
very
Jeremy. Thank you for
appreciative.
having me, and thank you for your interest in the museum in general. I'm always happy to find people from around the world who are interested in this project like we are, and who understand its value. So thanks a lot for that. And
It's
thank
my
you for
pleasure.
everyone tuning in. That applies to you guys too.
Fantastic. So yeah, for those who are interested, please do join our community at xrhq.com, where you can stay in touch with immersive applications in every industry around the world. And Nancy, would you like to provide any contact details or websites or
Yes,
anything
sure.
like
You
that
could.
for people to get
Where
in
would I
touch with
put
you?
it in the chat?
I can add it into
Yes,
the chat afterwards if
you
you
could
just
add it,
mention
please.
it, and then I'll add it in.
And put my email, Nancy Ali at Hassan Alam. You could put it there. My
Okay,
museum
excellent.
email.
So
Yeah.
I will put that on the LinkedIn comments right after this, so you can get in touch
And sure, and
with
people
Nancy
could
if you'd
just let
like.
me know that they're referred from this session, and so that I could know, and just send me an email and a shout out, and let's see what we could do.
Perfect. Thanks again so much, Nancy, and thanks to our
Thank you,
audience.
Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you,
Catch
guys.
you next time.
Bye, goodbye.